Welcome to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin. I believe every man has the potential to push past his limits and strive for something greater. Whether you're a former athlete who is looking for what's next, a professional pushing through the daily grind, or someone simply ready to break through life's toughest challenges, you're ready to step into the pursuit of something more. Your pursuit begins now. All right, welcome back to Men Pursuing More. I'm your host, Roger Maupin. Today, I am thrilled to welcome Paul Weidner to the show. Hey, welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Well, let's just share just briefly about you, Paul. I know you work at Great Lakes Baseball Academy. You're associate head coach at Bethel University. You're a mental performance coach. I think it goes on and on. You've spent decades at kind of multi-levels as assistant coach. I know you're at Creighton. Also, you've been involved in podcasting or like a co-host with Travis Rogers. You're a father. I know you have at least one, I think maybe. Yeah, you have one.
Two kids.
Two kids now. Okay, that's right. Yeah. Two. Let's get that straight. Strong faith, mentor, worked with countless young athletes. It's just like you're passionate about helping these young men navigate transitions, whatever that might be, build confidence and perform at their highest potential. So, Paul, it is an honor to have you on the podcast today. And what we're going to do is we're going to dive right into some quick hit questions, which are like sports questions. So let's start off with the first one. What is your favorite all-time sports moment?
This is tough. So while we're recording this podcast, the World Baseball Classic is going on. One of the things that comes to mind, this is a little bit of an obscure one, but there's so many moments to pick from. So I'll choose this. The moment where Adam Jones robbed his teammate, Manny Machado, in the World Baseball Classic in 2017. He robbed a home run in center field. I'm not sure how many people would remember that off the top of their head, but if you look at that moment, that was just a huge moment. And obviously we're playing for Team USA against the Dominican Republic, and that rematch is going to happen tomorrow in the semifinals as we're recording this podcast. But that was just a really cool moment, I think. It's one that's always stuck with me and one that I always smile about when I see something like that. It's cool.
Paul, what a cool story and it's going to happen tomorrow. the rematch.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to take place tomorrow. Love it. All right, your favorite team. I know this is challenging. College or pro, and maybe it's in baseball, maybe it's another sport.
It is the Minnesota Twins. Yeah, I've always been a Twins fan my whole life. Twins, when I was growing up, were doing really well. 2002, 3, 4 span was a very impressionable time for me when they were winning the American League Central Division, and that was Torrey Hunter, Justin Morneau, Joe Mauer, that type of an era. Doug Minkiewicz, Corey Koski, Jock Jones, all those players that were such. It was just a really impressionable time in my life and helped me fall in love with baseball for sure. So the Twins will always be my favorite team.
It sounds like you can probably name about every player that was on that team.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Christian Guzman, Denny Hawking, AJ Pierzynski, Brad Radke. You just watch a ton. And my dad and I, during that time, we're going to 15, 20 games a year at the Metrodome. And to go to 15, 20 games a year at the Metrodome, you actually had to like baseball because the Metrodome wasn't good for anything else. So it was good. It was a good time in my life. Yeah,
that's when you go to it that many times. And also, you're right, watching the game in the Metrodome, probably not the most ideal place for baseball, the game, but as the Twins have won a few championships in the domes.
Yep, exactly. And it was happening to me at the time. I didn't know any different. I thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. How about one coach or mentor who's had some of the, I know there's maybe been many, but had the biggest impact on your life?
Sure thing. Yeah. There has been plenty of them. I think obviously it starts with your first coach you ever have, which is your dad. So dad has always been a big part of my life and mentoring me and always being there for me. And both my parents obviously doing a great job of that. And then I'm going to go against your question. Sorry, I'm going to throw a few out there. Pat McEntee and Cal Thielbar were two of my baseball coaches growing up. And they really, again, helped me fall in love with the game and learn the game and mentored me at a really young age to play the game the right way and do things the right way. And so I've always been really appreciative of those two guys as well. Pat's son is now the assistant coach, recruiting coordinator at Minnesota State Mankato. And Cal's son, Cal Thielbar, is Caleb Thielbar, former Twins pitcher, and now pitches for the Cubs. And I saw a thing the other day, he's one of the 10 oldest players in Major League Baseball, I think I read now. So for him to have that longevity of his career is pretty cool. But so my dad, Pat McEntee, Cal Thielbar, going back to a really young age, those three were huge.
All right. Shout outs, especially your parents at a young age, but your dad taking it all those games.
Yep.
All right. Let's get into your story and share with the listeners, taking us back to the beginning of growing up. And you shared a little bit about your dad taking you to a number of games. What experiences growing up or early, let's not even say your coaching career, just with growing up before you head on to college to play baseball that really shaped you, and people that really mentored you, and just kind of the beginning, those first 18 years.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in Randolph, Minnesota, which is a small town in southern Minnesota by Cannon Falls, Northfield area, and really small school. So I graduated with about 50 kids, which meant playing multi-sports was a big thing. And I don't want to say easy to do, but it was certainly accessible to be able to be a 3-sport athlete at the varsity level and all the way down through youth, which I'm really thankful for. And that shaped my experience a lot. I loved playing multiple sports, and those experiences, being able to grow up in that community and try to do everything I could to make the school be really proud of what we were doing in sports in a community like that was always a really fun thing, and had plenty of people pour into us as athletes, plenty of teachers, plenty of coaches. I named a couple of them in Pat and Cal, and then played for Chris Stanton at the varsity level, who's still the head coach at Randolph. He ended up winning a state tournament with Randolph a handful of years back. And so we're really proud of him and all the work that he's done for that team and for the school in general. So that's where I was at. And then obviously started to look at college situations and knew baseball was the sport that I was going to play from a very young age. I was much better at baseball than I was at any of the other two sports, even though I was still able to play them at the varsity level. As I started to look at that, ended up at Bethel, which I'm sure you're going to ask about here soon, but that was my experience growing up.
Sure, with the listener, okay, class of 50, I'm sure you knew every one of your classmates. You probably knew them by name, probably knew a number of things about each one of your classmates at 50. So when you were growing up, especially being involved in sports, did you go to, especially for baseball, did you have any skill development done, or was that just with your coaches there and with your dad? Did you go into any camps? Just that you knew you were going to play baseball going beyond after high school. So what else did you do to really since you really had a passion for baseball?
Yeah, I was really lucky with Pat and Cal and my dad that they were really good at teaching skill-based stuff, really good at teaching the game. And I know I did a lot of private hitting lessons with Cal Thielbar, who was great at that. It's different than it is now, though, both in terms of how long ago it was, but also the community that we were in. And I'm sure up in the Twin Cities, club baseball organizations like what I work for now were just starting to exist. And so those having more resources to be able to do that year round was certainly happening, but more so just up in the cities and didn't have quite the reach that it does now. And so all the skill-based stuff that we would do was all based off whatever coaches were in your community. And I thought I was very fortunate to have two that were really good, two or more that were really good. So no, it is a little bit different than it is now, or was a little bit different than it is now. But we did do stuff year round. We did try to do player development type stuff, but it was all based off those two guys.
All right. Appreciate you sharing that, just kind of your development all the way up to you attending Bethel University. So why did you choose Bethel Universities? And then we know you're gonna play baseball there. And what was your experience as a student athlete there at Bethel? And how did that kind of shape you going forward regards to leadership, teamwork, personal growth, you name it, going forward?
Yeah. Yes, I knew I wanted to play college baseball. I knew that I was certainly not a scholarship level baseball player by any means. And so starting to look at Division III schools that were going to be able to be a good fit for me was pretty much what I narrowed down right away. I didn't tour any schools that I would not have been able to play baseball at. So went and just did some standard tours. I met a guy by the name of Dan Richards, who was still a big supporter of the baseball program, but he was a coach there at the time. And he was also in the admissions department. So I went there on just a standard student visit first, my sophomore year of high school. Met Dan Richards. Dan was a baseball coach there. And so started the recruiting process through him. And it was basically between that and one other school that was somewhat recruiting me. I think it looked a little bit different in my situation and a little bit different even back then with where the program was at, but recruited, so to speak, to play. And Bethel was by far the best choice for me. It felt like home pretty much right from the beginning. The people there that I knew I'd want to have in my life, I still feel like that way today, 20 or 15 years later, that I made the right choice as a junior in high school when I decided that I was going to go there. And so the whole process just was very obvious that Bethel was going to be where I was going to go, despite having a couple of other options, not a ton, but a couple of other options. And it just seemed so obvious. And that school and the baseball program has been hugely impactful on my life in many ways. Obviously, academically, that part was awesome. And I met my wife at Bethel. We were classmates together. She's a couple years older than me. We had a few classes together and met my wife there. So that was a huge thing. And then obviously what the baseball program has done for me personally, the passion that it still allows me to have to coach the game at a really high level. I'm really proud of what we've built. Coach Brian Robbie's first year at Bethel was also my first year at Bethel. So actually the coach that recruited me to play there as a head coach, that had the head coach there, was not the coach that was there when I arrived. And so that was a little bit of an uneasy feeling, but it ended up being an incredibly good thing for me. Brian Robbie's awesome, does such a good job. And the program at the time was not in a spot where it is now. We were not making the MIAC tournament. We were not doing any of that. And right away in his first year at Bethel and my first year at Bethel, I didn't have a lot to do with it on the field, but my first year at Bethel, we ended up making the MIAC tournament, which was a huge deal at the time. And so we've been building the program up ever since, and I've since won multiple MIAC championships. And so we're really proud of that. And that's been a really cool thing to see and be a part of. But yeah, it's just been a huge part of my life holistically in every single way. And then obviously the most important part of all of that would be what it's done for me and my faith. I talk about how baseball was the main driving force to get me to Bethel. And this is a very common story for athletes. Baseball got me there. And then the faith part really took over my life from there. Not that sports became any less important to me, but I'm so glad that I ended up there because it was part of my faith journey that's got me to where I'm at today, which is a really strong faith and wanting to live that out in all areas of my life, in the way that I parent, the way that I'm a husband, the way that I'm a leader in an organization, like all of that stuff. Faith comes into play in all of that. And that really started through my experience at Bethel.
Well, it gives you that kind of foundation. It's key. And I was going to say, a couple of key takeaways is really your development, your growth in your faith, but also meeting your wife. That'd be two takeaways. That other stuff is, but if you don't have certain things in place, you meet your wife, you get your faith, it's like things can easily spiral out of control. And just emotionally, mentally, and we'll get into also you as a mental performance coach too, and how that kind of drove you to be a mental performance coach. But let's talk about now going forward. You've coached in many different places. I know you've been at Creighton, Bethel. I know you work at the Great Lakes Baseball Academy. Now, how has those kind of experiences shaped your approach to your coaching, really kind of leadership, all you learned at Bethel, but what you learned beyond that? And then also as a mental performance coach. Yeah.
So all different areas that I've worked at, coached at, have served a really good purpose in making me grow as a person, which I'm really thankful for. I think the biggest thing from the Bethel University side of things has been the importance of creating a brotherhood and having faith, all that stuff that's big in leadership. And then I went to Creighton University. I was down there for 3 years. So just to give some people a sense of how that went. So I played at Bethel for 4 years, and I coached immediately at Bethel thereafter for 3 years. And then knew I wanted to see what coaching could do for me, the path could do for me, maybe trying to climb the ladder a little bit in that sense. And so I went to coach in the Cape Cod Baseball League in the summer of 2018. A really cool experience there. And through that, met the Creighton University right fielder who was on the team. Him and I had a good relationship. He let me know about an opening on Creighton University's staff, put in a good word for me, and then some other people helped me get to Creighton as well. Brian Robbie, some coaches on the Cape Cod staff, Brian Bamenek, all those guys helped me get to Creighton University. So I was at Creighton University for the spring of 2019, 20, and 21. Really good experience there. Biggest thing that I learned there is the power of discipline, accountability, attention to detail, The standards in that program are incredibly high under ed service in the way that you would behave and go about your business every single day. In fact, I would say it might have been the highest in the country, to be honest. Just this is the way we are going to do things, period, end of story. And there's a lot of accountability in that. And so I learned the value of that. I learned how much players and employees and whoever you might be leading actually crave structure. They don't hate structure, they actually crave it. So if you deliver that the right way, everybody can grow from that. So I learned a lot about that in my time at Creighton University. And then while I was at Bethel, both before and after, I was also working at Great Lakes Baseball Academy. And the biggest thing that I've learned and been forced to grow in there is the value of being able to serve in the way that you lead, and then watch how that works out for everybody. Great Lakes Baseball Academy is a private academy organization, private club baseball organization, in which, we don't love to view them as clients, but we are like in the service industry in a lot of ways at Great Lakes Baseball Academy. And so when you view it from that lens, you try to figure out how I can make the lives of those families and of those players better in a serving way, which is obviously good for their experience, good for our business, good for what we're trying to do from a mission standpoint, especially. And so I've learned the value of thinking about things from a serving standpoint, even as the director. Like, how can we serve these families, and then watch how that comes back to us in return in a really good way. So those three areas that are in places that I've worked have all had very distinct ways that they've made me grow, and I'm thankful for all three of them.
I appreciate you kind of sharing certain things about how important, like the structure, discipline, having high expectations, what you kind of learned from some takeaways from Creighton, but also servanthood. That's talked about. And some people, sometimes it goes like just surface level and people talk about it, but how important it is and how you can really serve people and how it builds organizations, it builds teams, it builds companies. I don't think it's talked about enough.
You're absolutely right. It's something that if you allow it to be at the foundation of what you do, all the decisions you make, the way that you behave, like you can really grow something pretty cool if you let it be like that. If it's just something that's talked about and then moved on from, and then it becomes more about you. And the funny thing is, and we see this all the time, it's not totally selfless to be able to do that, because when you lead from a place of serving, it does come back to you almost twofold. When we serve, the families are so willing to say, I want to be a part of what you're doing. And that's ultimately what we want. Whereas if we went away from serving families and tried to get them to be a part of what we're doing some other way, yeah, I don't think that would be as fruitful anyways. And so I'm not trying to come across as being this super selfless altered. And hopefully I have some of those qualities, but serve and then watch it come back to you. And then you can build something pretty cool that way.
I'm planning a webinar coming up in the next couple of months, and it's about parenting the competitive athlete.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just all based on performance. And from the talk we're having right now, it's not all just based on performance.
Yep. You're absolutely right. There's so much more that goes into that experience. And we can go into this side of things from like a mental performance standpoint. One of the things that I promise every athlete, coach, team that I work with from the mental side of things is that our goal together is to put you in positions where you will perform better. So I want to make sure that's said very outwardly, and that's okay to say that. But then the things that we're going to focus on to get there are going to be much more about, all the other ways that make it so that you're a stronger person, your identity is in a really good place, your ability to control your thought processes is in a really good place. The things that you are obsessing over are way more about controllable versus uncontrollable. And that applies to a lot of different things. So when we're talking about parenting the competitive athlete, I hope parents understand the value of that as well in focusing on the things that are good for your personhood development of your athlete, and then understand that you are not choosing church league softball and never being competitive. You're working on building the holistic person and watching what that can do on the field as well, as they get better at processing things with more perspective and being able to say, my identity is not rooted in my on-field performance in sports. In fact, the fact that it's over here and something more controllable and sustainable means that when I get in the batter's box, when I'm on the mound, when I'm at the free throw line, when I'm in the huddle, I'm able to control my heart rate, my breathing, all those things, because I'm not in such a panic about what if this doesn't go well? What does that mean for me? What is that? So it does lead to better performance if you allow yourself to view things differently. And it's really hard for parents to grasp that, I think, a lot of times. And that's okay. I have 2 kids as well. And guess what? When my son starts playing sports, I'm going to have to check my own stuff at the door too, to try to make sure I'm living out what I preach, but because it's hard. But that's really the way that I try to view it from a mental performance standpoint, and also working with a lot of really talented athletes and their families at Great Lakes as well. We do preach that message multiple times every year. Let us focus on these things, and then hopefully you'll see that play out in a really good way on the field too.
Well, just what you were just mentioning about players identify themselves so much on performance, and all of a sudden, like in baseball, I striked out, or I made a bad play, or we lost a close game. And all of a sudden, they're just like a mess for that day, days to come. They see videos of it. It's on social media. It's like everywhere. And I think players just have a hard time stepping away and moving away from that, and really, okay, your identity is it's not just based on your performance. And I think and you're probably coming across this word so much, overwhelming for like athletes these days, because there's so much out there. I can just click and there it is, a video of that highlight or that not so good highlight. And here's what my friends or others are saying about that game yesterday. And so that's got to be, it's something I'm sure you have to work through too with players, because it's out there. We're reading about it. We're reviewing it on video time after time.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot to try to get players to just focus on the controllables. I know that's something that, and maybe there are listeners that haven't heard that before, and so I'm happy to be sharing that with them. Control the controllables, and then let everything else just be what it is. Because if it's out of your control, it's probably not worth stressing over too much, which is so hard.
It is.
You know, that controllables things is something that is talked about a lot in the mental performance world, so I don't want to beat that one to death too much, but it's just a really important aspect. And if you think about 2 very key things in getting athletes to buy into the right stuff, it's how present can you be? So can my brain be where my feet are at? And then are you controlling the controllables, or are you obsessing over things that are not? You only have a certain amount of mental currency to give. If you have $1, 100 pennies, how many of those pennies are you willing to give to the umpire? Because when you give it to the umpire, you're not getting any return on that investment. Whereas if you focus on giving that elsewhere, you might actually get some return on that investment with your focus. And a lot of players spend 80 of their 100 pennies on the umpire, and they only have 20 cents left to try to hit. And that's not good. And that obviously can apply to all sports as well. But it's an important thing to try to get athletes in the right spot to do that.
That applies to just life in general, right there, what you just shared. So, well, let's talk about, we talked some about your mental performance coaching, but let's focus on, you wear many hats. I know now and share with us about how you became the associate head coach at Bethel. I know you do some podcasting, so share a little bit about that. At times you're a co-host, a father of 2 children, and then also you're a coach at the academy, and then you're also a mental performance coach. So how do you balance all that? And then share with us how you became, and when this happened, associate head coach, you became this mental performance coach. And we know you've been involved in the academy for some years.
Yeah. From a logistical standpoint, how do I balance all that? It's because I have an amazing wife, an amazing boss in Brian Bamenek, and an amazing boss in Brian Robbie that allow me to do the things in my schedule that make that puzzle fit. And so really thankful for everybody in my life that helps support me and just the puzzle that it can be. And the priority number 1 for me has always been being a dad and a husband, because when that part is taken care of, a lot of other things, it can be really fruitful in your life. And when it's not, obviously it's pretty hard to be the person that you want to be. And so my kids are really important to me. Being a dad is everything to me. And so as busy as I may get at times, it is always making sure that they are the first thing that gets what they need from me. The other side of things is just, how did all of this come to be? working at Great Lakes Baseball Academy is my full-time job. So that is where I actually make my full-time living, and really thankful for that. The Bethel University side of things, I'm very involved with that, but that is a part-time role. How I became the associate head coach at Bethel. So prior to me being the associate head coach, a guy by the name of Tim Beasley was the associate head coach. He was there right from the beginning in 2011, 2012 as well, with Brian Robbie, super instrumental in building the program up. And he left to take other opportunities after pouring so much of himself into Bethel and baseball and the Bethel baseball program. And so Tim and we still keep in touch, and he's an awesome dude. But that he had left the program in 2022, I believe, was his last year. So 2022 is his last year. And so I became the associate head coach in 2023 and have been ever since. And how did I become the associate head coach? I think that title was open, and Brian Robbie was looking at the staff that he had, and hopefully my experience was something that he felt to be worthy of that title. And it's been great ever since. We also have another person that does work full-time at Bethel by the name of Chad Richards. And so a lot of the logistical things that Tim Beasley was doing, setting up buses, flights, all that stuff, as we are down in Florida here, so much logistical planning, and Chad Richards does an amazing job of that. So Chad took the logistical side of things that was Tim Beasley's role. I'm more of the, maybe next person up on the coaching staff. If Coach Robbie ever got thrown out of a game, I would be the head coach. If we need, and Chad coaches first base, and he's really involved with the baseball side of things too. But he took a lot of the logistical stuff that Tim Beasley was doing, and I have a lot of the baseball stuff. That got a little long-winded, sorry. But that's how I became the associate head coach at Bethel. And then the mental performance side of things, it has just been a long time coming. I think I've always been really interested in it from the time I started coaching. Started coaching in 2013 while I was at Bethel, psychology major at Bethel. I think when you strip away a lot of the other, quote, other stuff in sports, what you're really left with is good coaches being really good at controlling or affecting the minds of their players in a positive way. And that can be universal across all sports. And it's a very personal touch on coaching as well. In order to understand the mind of an athlete or mind of your athlete, you do have to know them. You do have to get to know them as a person. Anybody can look at a swing and try to make a swing better, can look at a shot and make a shot better. If you want to be impactful on the mind of an athlete, you have to know that person. And so that's what I've always loved about that aspect of it. And so when I work with clients, when I work with our players, our athletes, a lot of the work up front is just getting to know what makes them tick, what makes them work, what do they value, why is it that they stress out so much about this, that, or the other thing. And I'm really passionate about that. And so when I had gotten back from Creighton that following year, I started a master's program at Adams State University in applied sports psychology. And I, through that, had started working with more clients, and now have graduated from that program with a master's degree, and now being a mental performance coach is a somewhat significant part of what I do. It's still Great Lakes is my full-time job, but I do a lot of mental performance work through Great Lakes. And then you combine the Bethel University and the mental performance, and you have a pretty good picture of everything that I do professionally.
And since you're on a podcast right now, I know you've had an opportunity with Travis Rogers. Just share with the listeners a little bit about that experience.
Yep. So Travis Rogers has a podcast called the Parenting Athletic Kids Podcast and the Get Your Mind podcast. The Parenting Athletic Kids Podcast is geared towards parents, as it sounds. And then the Get Your Mind podcast is geared towards athletes. And so what him and I do a lot, he is very much the host of it. He has had other guests on as well, other athletes, other coaches, other people in sports. I'm just more of a regular guest on it. I think we've done, I don't know how many episodes, at least it seems like 50 episodes together. So he's the host. I'm just a regular guest. And usually we'll pick a topic. So let's say the topic is like resiliency. We'll do one podcast geared towards the parents about how can you help your athlete with resiliency. And then we'll do a podcast geared towards the athletes on how can you be more resilient. And those get released together. And so the parent and the athlete can listen to the podcast and have that good conversation together, one geared towards them, one geared towards the parent. So that's been a really fun thing. Best thing about doing that, honestly, has been that it keeps me sharp. It keeps me learning more from another mental performance coach. Because if you're not intentional about that stuff, once you're done with your master's program, it's like, how do I keep learning? How do I keep growing? And you have to be intentional about it to do that. And I've really enjoyed the role that Travis Rogers has played in my life and asking me to be on the podcast. It's super fun to do, and it helps me grow and continue to have those conversations.
I like to use that word intentional. You got to be intentional about it, that you want to continue to grow, because we're all on a growth journey. We're never going to learn it all. We're never going to know it all. And we just want to make progress and continue on that growth upward journey. I appreciate you sharing that, because that's so important for listeners to hear that. And I continue to learn from all these podcasters I have on. Some are podcasters, some are just men that just sharing their journey, and it just takeaways on every episode. I'm growing and learning new things. So I just really appreciate your insight on all that you've shared so far. So let's move on to you shared a little bit about that your faith seems central to your life and work. How did your faith influence your approach to, and you shared a little bit about this coaching, mentoring, and really helping athletes navigate that tough season on and off the field?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate when I coach at Bethel, that gets to be a very outwardly spoken thing. And so we talk about faith regularly, and being able to mentor and help people grow in areas of their life in their faith, and also using faith to grow in all areas. In the other areas of my life, so Great Lakes Baseball Academy, I'm really fortunate to, Brian Bamanek is a man of faith as well. And so it certainly can be talked about, but we're a private organization, and so it's not quite the same as Bethel, as you can imagine. So when I'm able to use it in that way, I view it more along the lines of, are you rooted and grounded in something other than sport, and something that is something that you can control? I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but when an athlete, and this happens often, when an athlete maybe alludes to the fact that they have a faith in their life, which can open up a door to be able to talk about that, I always point to it and say, okay, so we've talked about your need to have your identity be in something other than sports, right? And now you've mentioned to me that you have a faith. Do you understand that one of the best things to put your identity in is in that faith part of your life? And if you do, and you buy into that, and that's a real thing for you, then the building blocks that go on top of that I use, like for my mental performance work. So right on top of the identity thing, that's the foundational block of the pyramid, is your passion, right? So if you have a good at sport identity, or identity in something other than sports, your passion can grow, because you're not so consumed with how it makes you feel about yourself as a person. And the blocks go all the way up to the pyramid. And so the faith piece gets to be lived out more in that way, or used more in that way, when we're not talking about Bethel.
That's so good, because that's as this podcast, as we've journeyed through this podcast recording in the last 15, 20 minutes or so, I've thought about things like that, about what about players? What about their identity? They put so much on their performance. And I appreciate you sharing that about. And let's just go back about how important expectations are. Because some coaches that with the players today, I need to kind of lower expectations. And I hear different range of coaches, and coaches say, no, why lower your expectation? This is what we expect. You're cheating the kids. So share with us about that, about your program and what you experience, about how important it is to have those high expectations.
Well, I think that when you lower expectations, all you're doing is trying to protect them from negative emotions. And I think that's very damaging for development. I think what you should be doing is having very high expectations for what you're trying to do. Then they will either meet those expectations, and then we have great performance and things are great in that way, or they fail to meet those expectations. Then they experience negative emotions. And then we, as mentors in their lives, are there for them to help with those negative emotions, process it, respond in the right way, and then move forward. Negative emotions are unavoidable in life at some point. And my fear is that we do a lot of things right now to try to protect young people from any sort of negative emotion that they may feel. And I don't think that's good. As well-intentioned as it may be, a lot of the messaging that athletes get, or young people get, I think, is positive emotions and good emotions are the only acceptable emotions to have, as opposed to saying, nope, anything that we ask of you is going to be more behavior-based from a standard standpoint, not emotions-based. Feel, experience whatever emotions come to you. And then our expectation is that you learn how to process those appropriately and behave appropriately despite the negative emotion that you feel. not try to make it so you don't feel it in the first place. So that got a little bit deep, but that's where I think of that in terms of why would you ever lower expectations? Have high expectations. You learn to deal with the pressure of high expectations as well. I think that's really fun. I'm fortunate to say that's where we're at in a place like Bethel. We expect to win. We expect to perform well. Do we do it all the time? No. But when we go into a game, we have those high expectations. And I want guys that can lean into that and say, I embrace that and want that. Whereas if we lower expectations, what good does that do? I'm not trying to exceed low expectations. I'm trying to exceed high ones. That's where we can really be great.
I love it. Keep those expectations high.
Yep.
Love it. Let's move on to mentorship and how it's been a big part of your journey. And just because you mentioned a number of coaches, your parents really being an influence in your life. What role has like accountability played in your life in coaching? How do you help young men kind of embrace it? You shared a little bit about that, but just mentorship for you, but also mentorship and coaching for players.
Yeah, I know I need mentorship as much as players need mentorship from me. And so I think I would always be nervous to be in a situation where if I like looked upward and I didn't see anybody that I felt could mentor me, I'd be like, oh man, what? I don't want that. I want to be able to have some people that are around me or above me or whatever that can do that in my life. And that helps a bunch. Nobody was better at the accountability piece, in my opinion, than Ed Service. Accountability was super high, and I learned the value of that a lot under him, coaching under him at Creighton. As far as the mentorship side of things goes, nobody has been better at that in my life, in my adult life, than Brian Bamenuk, who I work for now at Great Lakes. We have conversations all the time about how can we be better as an organization? How can him and I be better as the leadership kind of team at the top of Great Lakes? And then him being able to have conversations with me about ways that I can be better in serving other people and serving our employees and all that stuff. And I value that. He is excellent at that. I'm really fortunate to call him a friend as well as my boss in that way. And then obviously mentorship and accountability for other people, not to repeat myself from earlier, but just I actually think people crave that. Like when they understand the expectation very clearly, they can conform to it as long as you've created buy-in and trust from them. When the accountability and expectations are not clear, they're just going to wander. And that doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong. It just wanders off the path of where we feel like we're headed. Be very clear with your expectations and direction, and then watch people hopefully conform to that and go. And if they're not, you probably have lost them on the buy-in standpoint, and you need to build a better relationship with them and get them on the same page with you. But so I know there was a few different ways, up, lateral, and down, that I talked about that. But all three of those areas are important when I think about mentorship and accountability.
You think about coaching, a coach needs to be coached. They don't have all the answers. Yeah. Never want to get in this space where I got it all, I know it all. You just listen to me, players, or other coaching staff, the rest of my coaching staff, just listen to me. It's like none of us have. You're only as good as the coaches around you, so you're building up your coaches, but you also have others that are feeding you and coaching you. And then also with mentorship, it's like you might be mentoring others, but you better have someone mentoring you. Or like you're a mental performance coach, you're working with, let's say, these young athletes, you better have someone that's like working on you as well. And sometimes we forget about that step. That it's like, you know what? I got it. I'm all good. I'm good. Yep. I got it all. Yep. I have all this experience. And continue to need that. Continue to need people that they're so into you. Constantly.
Yep. You are right. Absolutely.
So let's get to, I know you've given us a lot of advice. Any other best advice that has ever been given to you that you want to share from some coaches, parents that maybe you haven't shared, and why was it? And a shout out to who gave it to you.
Yeah. One of the things I've heard a few different coaches say this, but this is strictly from the baseball coaching side of things, and it can apply to others as well. But what you permit, you promote. And so I was like, okay, so when you think about what you're allowing athletes, employees, whatever, to do, allowing seems sometimes, what's the harm in allowing them to do things a certain way? You don't need to be micromanaging them, certainly, but what you're permitting them to, quote, get away with, you are you're essentially promoting it, because that will come back to you, and you'll be the face of whatever they end up doing, right? So what you permit, you end up promoting. And then as you're trying to build something and scale something, that can be really big, you don't want to have these different patches of things that you've permitted to go on for a long time that now you have to work to remove. That's much, much more difficult. And so as hard-handed as that can sound and almost sound like micromanaging, it's just an understanding that those two things are the same. If you're permitting it to happen, you're actually promoting it to happen. And if it's not a part of your vision long-term, you shouldn't do that. You should not allow those things to take place within an organization or a team or whatever it is that you're leading. So I heard that advice from a few different coaches, both separately. So it must be some fairly common advice, but I've really enjoyed examining the way that I lead from that lens and asking myself, what am I permitting here? What should I really try to put the clamps down on versus what am I okay with letting go? Like, I want to allow our people to have some freedom with what they do. And if I'm okay with that at scale, then all good. Might not be the way that I would do it, but no worries. But if I'm not okay with it, then we got to talk about it.
All right. That's amazing advice. That's like something maybe you don't always think about it, but it goes back to what we were talking about before about you need to be mentored as a coach. And then what you're going to permit, you better be prepared for what you're promoting. That's so good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, we're wrapping this up for all the men, as well as there's women listening too, but this is called Men Pursuing More. Who knows he can do more, but feels sometimes it might be coaches, it might just be young athletes, it might be athletes that have been in the game for a while, at the beyond the college level, maybe even at the professional level. They just feel stuck, they feel overwhelmed, or just unsure of things. What advice or encouragement do you want to share with them today?
Yeah. Brian Bamak and I were talking about this the other day. It comes to mind when you ask that question. You should try as often as possible to be the quote least of person in the room, assuming everybody in the room still wants you there. So if everybody in the room, in the room in quotations, like whatever the situation is, whatever organization, whatever group, whatever, you should actually want to put yourself in situations in which you are the least of them, and then they still want you there. Because if you are continually surrounding yourself with people that are farther along than you in your career, or farther along than you in whatever you are trying to get better at, you will end up being with them in that journey, as opposed to constantly seeking out situations in which you are at the top. You'll end up at the top of whatever it is that you want to have. I'm in a few different leadership positions, which I'm really thankful for. But I'd like to think that I was able to get there by saying, what rooms can I get into where I look up and I go, I cannot believe I'm in the same room as this person. And the person wants me there because I'm adding value to them as well. You don't want to just get there and not add any value. Add value to those people's lives, but put yourself in situations in which you are the quote least impressive, and then watch how your career can take off and your life can take off from there. And so some people are really afraid of that because it makes them really insecure. Don't think of it like that. Gladly open yourself up to being the least of something, because I think that can make you grow really fast and ultimately provide some pretty cool opportunities for you.
And that's great advice or what you shared about just for young athletes coming up, even athletes that you're coaching right now. And then also aspiring coaches that want to be, I don't know if I can be around those coaches, just not at that level. Get around them, find a way to get around them, learn from them, be humbled, but be intentional. You've used that word a few different times about being intentional of taking note, asking questions. Sometimes you're just around, but it's like you're observing the actions, but also you need to also ask the questions too. Don't be afraid to maybe even ask the tough questions and just to help yourself move forward.
Yeah. And I continue to try to put myself in those situations. One of the easiest examples I can think of is something I'm proud to say that I did was, so I was interviewing for this job at Creighton University. And while I was at Creighton, that's a Division I coaching staff, and a lot of guys that I would be in the room and I would say I am the least of. The pitching coach pitched at AAA, the assistant coach recruiting coordinator he continues to be an amazing coach. He's now the assistant coach recruiting coordinator at the University of Minnesota. And then Ed Service, who kind of a legend in college baseball. And then me, I'm the fourth person in that room. What have I done to deserve that? But in the interview process, it was between me and a guy that in the previous 1 or 2 years was an all Big 12 outfielder. So those are the two candidates that it came down to. And I believe that I got the job over that guy because I was willing to do things that felt more like serving the other three coaches instead of the other three coaches serving me in my career. And so I did a lot of scrubbing stains out of baseball pants while I was at Creighton University, I'll be honest. They just allowed me to coach first in the outfield. My real job was laundry and a lot of the other stuff. And that's okay. I'm perfectly comfortable in saying that. But I was willing to do that so that I could be in that room, learn from those people, and make myself a heck of a better baseball coach and hopefully a better person as well. But so make sure you're serving the people that are in the room with you. But if you're willing to do that, pull up a chair and look upward. Don't pull up a chair and try to always be at the top. Spend some time at the bottom of the totem pole. There's a lot of value in that.
So much value. So appreciate it, Paul. Thank you for your dedication to athletes, your commitment to your faith, and the way you really invest in men's growth, both on and off the field. So where can listeners connect with you and follow your work?
Yep. So first of all, Great Lakes Baseball Academy. So that's where I work. On Twitter at Paul Weidner 11. And that's probably the biggest thing. I know I repost a lot of things from my podcast with Travis Rogers. I'm hoping that I get a chance to repost a few things from this podcast as well. And just some other things that I do from a mental performance side of things is on my Twitter page. That's probably the best place to do it. And follow along with the Bethel Royals as we go through this season and beyond.
And you're with your team, right? Down in Florida.
Yeah, down in Florida. As of the recording of this podcast, we're down in Florida over spring break. It sounds like back in Minnesota, we're going to get a foot or two of snow tomorrow. And so I'm happy to be down in Florida playing some baseball with Bethel.
Yeah, here we are preparing for the snowstorm up here in Minnesota. So,
yep.
All right, that's a wrap with Paul Weidner on the Men Pursuing More podcast. Thank you for tuning in and keep pursuing more. Hey, thanks for listening to Men Pursuing More podcast. Don't forget to follow us at maupincoaching.com.